But I find a certain excitement these days that people are finally starting to look at that, because I feel we're at a tipping point. Maybe it's with the tea parties, maybe it's the rallies, but I'm getting a sense that people might not understand it on the PhD level that you understand economics, but they understand you can't keep living off your credit cards. You get that same sense?
I would agree. And I think that Penn was talking about how we're living beyond our budget, and I think there's a distinction that needs to be made there. The government is living beyond its means, but savings rates are up, credit card debt is down, and that's a good thing. And part of that commitment by ordinary families like my own is that we resist more spending by government. And across the ideological spectrum, we're seeing that. But as far as Colorado being forced to balance its budget under a constitutional mandate, this has become a big, fun game for so many bureaucrats at the highest levels of our state government. If we look to higher education, we hear again and again and again that the state funds only 1 out of every $10, if that, of higher ed spending. But what our universities are doing is balancing the budget on the backs of Colorado's working families. And we are seeing horrific tuition increases. Some students at CU this year will experience a 12% tuition increase just from last year alone. And this is after 3 years of tuition increases on top of that.
How can that be? We passed a constitutional not a constitutional, but we took out Tabor for 5 years. We had Hank Brown doing advertisements saying, if we don't pass Referendum C, higher ed will die. When we passed Referendum C, how in the world is higher ed still hurting?
Well, let's make sure that the people watching the show understand that Tabor really doesn't affect the revenues during this recession. Tabor is about, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights is about keeping government from growing too fast as it starts raking in revenues. Well, in a recession, families' budgets go down, government's budgets go down. And so Tabor doesn't govern the problem we're having now in terms of the amount of revenues coming in. You need a healthy economy to do that.
But to follow up on this, it seems with higher education that is where the problem starts for so many families. The average student now, including parent debt and credit card debt, graduates with over $40,000 in student loans. This is coming out of undergrad. This is before you get to graduate school or professional school like law school or medical school. That is huge. And in that environment where the federal government and the state government to a lesser extent guarantees almost a limitless amount of financial aid, students are getting acclimated to a certain lifestyle. They're spending $5,000 to go to Cabo San Lucas for spring break. And for students that don't necessarily, who have more fiscal restraint, they're having to take out loans simply to face these huge tuition increases. So the average student coming out could be paying $400, $500, $600 a month in student loans. They are behind even before they get their first job, and it sets us up for this climate where debt is the norm, and we have no adequate market response because this debt is guaranteed by our government.
Largest part of our budget is education. That, what is it now, almost 50% of our budget?
Well, it's 43.3% of the general fund.
Goes to education, goes to K-12 education. Now that budget is being squeezed, not because of Tabor, but because of the economy, is it time that we start looking at what we're actually getting for the education dollar? And I've looked at private schools. You and I have gone to a great little school nearby here, actually, called Watch Care Academy. And it's a private school. It's what, $2,000 or $3,000 a year, and it's.
Oh, it's more than that, but.
Is it? What is it?
Well, I'm not sure. It used to be around 7,000.
Okay.
But most of the kids there, if not all of them, are on scholarships that pay from a scholarship that pays for probably a good part of it.
But how is it that these private schools can provide what seems to be a much superior education compared to a government school, which costs more not only for the operations, but you're also spending a bunch for the debt and the buildings?
Well, of course, it depends on the private school, but I would say one of the big differences is they're not dealing with a huge bureaucracy, and they also can choose their teachers. They can let their teachers go. Teachers are key as far as providing a great education. But speaking about using our money wisely, if you think about how much we spend per student, the average is somewhere around $7,200 per child in Colorado. Now, that one school district might get $6,800, another might get $15,400, so there's this range. But if we gave every family that wanted one, a voucher or even a tax credit for $4,000, think about how much the state would save. Now, school districts would whine and they would say they would be losing kids, but are we beyond that now? At this time, maybe we need to look at the bigger picture and just start really seeing how can we provide a really quality education for children for less dollars.
So are you saying that during economic tough times, there's actually some opportunities here to really look at and revamp education? So it would save government money if we gave people cash and said, here, go out into the marketplace. How is that?
Well, it just would be. It would be if you gave, let's not even talk about means-tested vouchers. Let's talk about universal vouchers for a moment. We've got private schools shutting down because of the economy. There aren't enough people that can pay for it. So let's give people, and of course politically, universal vouchers, that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. But let's just say in the ideal world. And so a certain percentage of families might say, yeah, I'd like to go to the Catholic school down the street, and the state could say, okay, parents, you're choosing, we're not choosing for you, but here's $4,000, go ahead, go down there. And what's the state going to save? Well, they're going to at least save a couple of thousand, if not more, maybe 3,000, 4,000, depending on the school district.
What a bizarre world that the more people that abandon government education and take, a half, 2/3, 3/4 of that money means that the government has more money to look with. All right, let's talk about opportunities in this new political realm. Is there an opportunity to get back to basics, what we used to call core functions of government?
I think government, John, is going to use the Rahm Emanuel view that if you've got a crisis, you take advantage of it by growing. And so you're going to find that most of the legislators are going to stand up and say, yep, whether you like it or not, we're going to have to raise your taxes coming up. This would be a better time, I think, to say, let's look at the core functions of government, as you mentioned, as well as to how we operate. Where there's supposedly been a freeze on the number of state employees, but yet I read that 800 people have been hired during the freeze by the Ritter administration. We're now thousands of people over where we used to be in employment levels. When you talk about sending more money to universities, state universities and colleges, what you find is again and again the tuition goes up or the cost goes up, but you don't really save the kids any money. That the extra money thrown in by the state gets built into the base there, and you don't find the state colleges asking, should we be privatizing some of these services? Should we be doing things better or more efficiently, or do we want to kind of do it the bureaucratic, centralized, unionized way?
We have a phenomenal opportunity right now. CU is screaming that it's broke, and yet it has chancellors making $700,000 a year. It's screaming it's broke, and yet it's opening deluxe new art galleries and technological centers and GLBT student gathering rooms. $100 million gymnasiums on some college campuses, not at CU, it's had its. But let's rethink what our university should be doing. Should we have a government-run recreation center that is a quarter mile from a 24-hour fitness that can provide the same services and more at a quarter of the cost? If the center-right does not utilize this opportunity, this current economic environment right now, and communicate to people about why less government is better for them, then I'm afraid we have missed one of the best opportunities, if not the best opportunity in modern history.
This brings it back to what we all do at the Independence Institute. We are a PR firm for free market ideas, and boy, is our work needed now more than ever. This is some scary stuff, because I think you paid it right, Penn. The other side is going to say, this is a crisis, we need your money. How do we get out the message that, wait a second, this isn't a crisis, this is an opportunity for us to reevaluate how we do business and focus on outcomes? I know on education we want to focus on the kids. I don't think that's where the focus is. Right now we have an amendment that says we don't care about the kids, we care about funding. Funding comes first, and this idea that if there's funding, it's good for the kids. Can we ever change that debate to show that there are other school districts in other states that do more with less money?